Zannah was trying to concentrate, gathering her mental energies for the coming battle. She was distracted, however, by her master's own preparations. Darth Bane was prowling back and forth like an angry rancor, his lightsaber already drawn. She could feel the dark side building inside him, fueled by his rage, his never-ending hatred of the Jedi, his resentment toward Daravit for exposing them, his anger at her for leading the Jedi here to Tython. At any moment, she expected to see the bloodlust of the Orbalisks unleashed, but Bane kept his fury in check, saving it for the coming battle. Her master had led them back inside the stronghold to a large open room with an exit at either end. A single door would have been easier to defend, but he was wary of getting trapped. If the Jedi cornered them, they would settle in for a long siege and wait for reinforcements to arrive. As the last two surviving Sith, Zannah and her master did not have the same luxury, so it was important that they keep alternate escape routes open. The room was empty, completely devoid of any furniture. Based on that fact and its great size, 40 meters by 30, she guessed it had been built as some kind of practice arena or training center. In addition to the exits on either end, there was a small door on one of the side walls that led to a tiny dead-end room. It had probably served at one time as a storage closet for weapons, targets, and other implements used in drills or training. At Bane's instruction, she'd stashed the data card from the archives inside the closet, and her master had done the same with Belia Darzu's holocron. At her suggestion, Daravit was hiding in there too. He was unarmed, and he would be of no help to either side. "Don't come out until the fighting's done," she'd warned him, drawing a sour, disapproving look from her master. "He'll only get in the way," she'd explained as Daravit had closed himself in. Now there was nothing to do but wait for the enemy to arrive. Fortunately, or unfortunately, they didn't have to wait long. The doors on either end of the room burst open simultaneously, the Jedi splitting their numbers in two to better coordinate the attack. The first group, a female Ichani wielding a blue lightsaber in each hand, and the Jedi Master in garish clothes with a golden blade, charged straight for Bane. The other two, a lean, quick-looking Jedi armed with a green lightsaber, and a gigantic mountain of a man spinning a massive blue, double-bladed weapon, came at her. Zannah ignited her own double-bladed lightsaber and threw up a twirling wall of defense, though her weapon looked puny and insignificant set against the blue monster brandished by the larger of her two opponents. Before they could engage her, she backpedaled toward one of the corners, stopping several meters from the intersection of the two walls. This allowed her to protect her flanks, but still left enough space for her to duck, dodge, and evade the weapons of her enemies. From the corner of her eye, she saw Bane take a completely different approach. Protected by his Orbalisk armor, he charged forward to meet the two Jedi Masters confronting him, head-on. And then, her enemies fell on her. It took only seconds for her to realize that the bigger man was by far the more dangerous opponent. In the time it took for the smaller man to strike at her twice with his green blade, she had batted aside half a dozen attacks from the other. There was a marked difference in the style and effectiveness of their blows as well. The skills of the Jedi with the green lightsaber were raw and basic. When he struck, it was with either strength or speed, but not both at the same time. His blade came in either high or low, but never altered its plane during the attack. In contrast, the big man attacked her from creative and unexpected angles, the massive blue blades changing course mid-thrust. Each offensive was a model of lethal efficiency, quick and powerful strikes and counterstrikes that kept an opponent guessing. Yet as long as Zannah kept her blade spinning to hold this momentum, she was able to ward off both their attacks easily using whirling parries, in large part because the Jedi with the green lightsaber was inadvertently working at cross purposes to his partner. He was attempting to alternate his forays with those of the bigger man, expecting they would take turns pressing forward, then withdrawing, always keeping Zannah on defense. But the incredible reach of the bigger man's weapon made it difficult for him to unleash a sustained volley without fear of injuring or even killing his companion when the other man moved in to join the fray. As a result, the bigger man constantly had to step back, pull up, or lay off his attacks. He was forced into an awkward rhythm of advance and retreat. His timing and strategy dictated as much by his ally as by his opponent. Zannah noted all this from behind the impassable wall of her spinning twin blades, content to play a completely passive role in the encounter. Were it not for the big man's brilliance, she would have quickly switched to an aggressive sequence and easily dispatched the smaller man. But were it not for the smaller man's mediocrity, her defensive talents would have been pushed to the very limits by her more skilled opponent. The arrangement suited Zannah just fine, allowing her to play them off against each other. She didn't need to kill them. She only needed to hold them at bay until Bane, protected by the invulnerable Orbalisk shells, killed his two opponents and came to her aid. She waited until it was time for the smaller man to attack again, then gauged his painfully predictable incoming stroke. Knowing exactly where it would end by watching where it began, she was able to momentarily divert her attention from the combat to see how her master was doing. To her surprise, both of Bane's opponents were still standing, proof they were exceptionally skilled combatants. She also noticed that a fifth Jedi had entered the room, an Ithorian who stood apart from the battle, his eyes closed as if he was meditating. And then she turned her focus back to her own melee, just in time to avoid certain death. The glance in her master's direction had lasted only a fraction of a second, but in the brief interval of her distraction, the larger man had sprung forward, jabbing the tip of one of his blades toward her eye like a spear. Zannah snapped her head to the side at the last possible instant, hearing the hiss as the blade sheared off a lock of her hair. The sudden movement threw off her timing and balance, and as her spinning lightsaber slapped away the blow she had earlier anticipated from the smaller man's green blade, it lost its centripetal momentum and faltered. In the split second it took to roll her wrists and start the intricate whirling patterns of her blades again, she was vulnerable. The big man sliced high at her head, forcing her to duck, then chopped in low at her feet on the backstroke, causing her to jump before she could properly set herself. She avoided the swipe, but landed clumsily on her feet. Another blow rained down on her. With her body out of position, she was forced to block its path rather than deflect it to the side. The power of the impact sent her reeling, and she fell to the floor. The man with the green lightsaber saved her. He leapt in to finish her off, blocking his companion from doing the same. Against his pedestrian assault, she was able to regain her feet and slide into the sequence of moves that were the foundation of her virtually impenetrable style. There was a brief instant when she saw an opening, but rather than choose to kill the man with the green lightsaber, she let him live, knowing he was a greater hindrance to his allies than he was to her. From across the room, one of the other Jedi called out, "Johun! Sarro! We need reinforcements!"
"Go!"
the big man shouted.
"I can handle this one."
And suddenly, the man with the green lightsaber was gone. The olive-skinned giant reared up to his full height. Zannah realized he was even taller and more heavily muscled than Bane. The air sizzled as his long lightsaber carved an elaborate flourish around his body, then another above his head. He smiled down at her knowingly. Then he leapt forward, and the real battle began.